Hello everyone, welcome to Coffee Cup Enlightenment. Today's video is going to be titled Humanity's Deep Sleep. And what is humanity's deep sleep? It is, it's like a spell that we've been put under for eons, where a substitute character has been created. And we're identifying with it and giving life to this substitute identity. So it's like here's us, and then here's this substitute identity. First, we're babies, there is no substitute identity. We're a blank slate, there's no stories yet, no identification with any ideas yet. In fact, you don't even know how to cognitize yet when you're a baby. So you're naked of ideas, you're naked of identity, and this is probably the closest you are to your true self. But then as you get older, you know, your surroundings, the people, your family tell you who you are. They react towards you, and through their reactions, this substitute identity gets born. And it's born out of ideas. And it gets added upon like a mobile phone. It gets updated weekly. New ideas get added to it. And it is us as consciousness identifying with this bundle of ideas. And this bundle of ideas, as mentioned in previous videos, can be predominantly negative or predominantly positive. Hello, I'm a positive substitute identity. But regardless if it's positive or negative, it's not you. It's just a substitute identity. This is you. And this substitute identity is subject to it's subject to an experience of being touched and affected, because it consists of something, and through its diminishment of its ideas, through its world that it lives in, then gives rise to the effect of being touched or affected or whatever within that realm of effect. But the consciousness that we are doesn't have any content to it. It doesn't have any ideas. It's the life giver of this bundle of ideas. Therefore, it is untouchable. And that's why when people have near-death experiences, they experience the peace of God that defies all understanding, as it's called. And that's what happened to me a few years ago when I had the enlightenment experience that lasted 1.5 days. Within 1 second, as I opened my eyes in the morning, the substitute identity was in front of me, and then 1,000,000 kilograms was lifted in an instant, and so too the monkey mind voice went with it. So there was silence, and there was an incomprehensible level of peace where you couldn't even imagine in 1,000,000 years what it would be like, and it was so peaceful that you really didn't need to be on this planet anymore. Like there's no such thing as fear. In order to have fear, you must be a somebody and a someone. And I wasn't in La La Land. I was, as I'm speaking to you now, but there was this weight lifted, tremendous a level of weight, and a feeling of ever wholeness, because you don't consist of content anymore. You already were whole, and it's this substitute identity that's striving your entire life to be whole. You know, and that's why in the Bible it says, "Be ye whole like your Father in heaven." That means that your true nature is just as consciousness now is already whole. And it's only to this consciousness that you are starts identifying and believing itself to be this substitute identity again, then the experience through it, this substitute identity, gives you the experience of unwholeness, incompleteness, never-ending dissatisfaction, um, and unease, stress, and being affected, being an affected one. But this all pertains in the realm. of the substitute identity, not our identity. And it's only until you get a glimpse, maybe, or get to experience enlightenment. My enlightenment only lasted 1.5 days, and then the next day, this 1 million kilograms gradually returned over a few hours. So I was able to see the contrast between living in the state of no more identification anymore, no more substitute identity, no more of its struggles, its monkey mind voices, its judgments, in the complete absence of all of that. And what was left in the contentless state, in the naked state, similar to that of the baby, is your true identity, and it's effortless, untouchable, immaculate, ever perfect. Now, this deep sleep that humanity has been in probably existed for millions of years. It's been going on for there's in mythology. It's said that in the golden era, humanity once upon a time, possibly not identified, and we lived in a state where we had no identifications. Even the Bible sort of talks about like Adam and Eve, where they ate off the tree of knowledge, and that's sort of depicting a story that Adam and Eve had the enlightened state, and there was just one simple message: is don't touch that apple, don't touch that tree, and the tree is called the tree of knowledge, which represents concepts. So it's like a symbolic, you can say, the tree of knowledge, and so you can have the everything ever perfect, ever touchable for eternity, or you could step into the world of individualism and take a bite of that apple, and that's what that story sort of represents, and that's where consciousness then created this illusionary identity of individualism. So and that's essentially what the substitute identity is. It's an individual, it's a self, and it's a self that can be touched and affected, a self that compares itself to other selves, a self that believes itself to be diminished by other selves, which are all illusionary. So, and the deep sleep this is the deep sleep, is that as we identify with this, we step into its world through identification and thinking that we are it, and then it's the one making the judgments to the world based on its content of what it was made up of for its entire life. The version 2 million and 500,000, whatever version it's up to, prints out to the world what judgments and comments it makes and feelings it has towards the world. So it is the one doing it, not us, and that's the deep sleep. And as it makes the judgments, it's the one feeling disturbed. That's the deep sleep as well. It's disturbed, not us. So it's making the judgments, it's getting disturbed, and we're the one giving life to this character because we're believing it's us making the judgments, it's us being disturbed. And the cycle just goes on and on. As long as a collective, we, nearly every TV program you watch, there's, especially these emotional Jersey Shores and, desperate, whatever those Hollywood Housewives and all that, all the dramas that you see in those sort of episodes, the voice spoken is the voice of the substitute identity, and it's pure delusion, but it's spoken. We've reached a point, which is why it's such a deep sleep, we've reached a point where that these voices are spoken as if it's a given, as if it's factual. And this is even more evidence of how much of a deep sleep we're in. We've got entire psychological industries developed, pharmaceutical industries developed, that write textbooks of who we are, which are the substitute identity, not us. And those textbooks are growing by the day. They get thicker and thicker by the day. ADDT and depression. The substitute identity is depressed, and it's meant to be depressed because it consists of content. It will never be enough. It's a bottomless pit, and its only pathway is ultimately destruction. And that's why it is a sinking ship, this substitute identity. And if you believe you are it, eventually it's going to go into some destructive path, and then you'll believe that you are that character that feels so bad and keeps projecting its badness out into the world. And I'll just pause it for a sec. So the deep sleep is number one. It's the substitute identity that's talking and being affected. And we're so identified as a culture that we believe it's us. The deep sleep is that if you go to the counselor, they're saying that you are this state. You have ADDT and um, bipolar and all these sorts of things, but that's the substitute identity. So technically, every substitute identity is a psychopath. It's because its very nature of what it consists of is it's always trying to be like you, which is untouchable, and it'll never get there. It strives and never arrives. And so yeah, just imagine what sort of a world we're living in, where your entire surroundings, every single word spoken around you, and everything that you see on TV, every song lyric, the psychology industry, every single aspect around your surroundings, pretty much 99% of it is based on this substitute identity being mistaken for who we are and spoken as if it's us speaking. So and it's us that's giving it life. So what ends all this to deep sleep? There are two things. The first thing is um, you can make a vigilant practice not to speak on not to give it a voice anymore. This substitute identity, and catch it out when it does speak. And or number two is let it speak as much as it wants, but know you are not it, and laugh about it. Whatever it says, and it reacts. Even in the moments of its reaction, I've done this a million times now, where my substitute identity makes a judgment on observing that, and then it's feeling a reaction to its own judgment and observing that, and it externalizes itself out into the world through some words and feelings and emotions. And then I'm able to come in with a smile and look at all of that, the entire character and the whole play on the stage. And to the point where, because I'm looking at it and not identifying with it anymore, and it's exposed out in the open, and I'm not identifying with it anymore, it explodes and turns into euphoria. The energy that was trapped in that for many years returns back to you, and is experienced like a feeling of euphoria. So you can. It's possible once you learn a bit of mindfulness, just the basic mechanics of mindfulness, and understand how this character plays out on the stage. Um, and the key ingredient is not taking it personally, because it's not you, it's a character on the stage, and this eventually helps sever the life umbilical cord that you give to this substitute identity. And as it's exposed and recognized, it explodes and turns into euphoria like an orgasm. That's what can happen. Doesn't necessarily have to happen all the time, but can occasionally happen. And you should feel a weight lifted. And it was the weight of this substitute identity through its experience. As it dissolves, it disappears. And proof and evidence of this is the things that make you cry, that used to make you cry as a kid, now make you laugh as an adult. And that's because this parts of this substitute identity for everyone has naturally already dissipated, and that umbilical cord has been severed naturally. So it's a natural process. The substitute identity already has been dissolved many, many, many times, millions of times already, depending on how old you are. And generally speaking, as you get older, there's a potential for some people to have very little substitute identity, and for some, as they get older, they can have very big, even bigger substitute identities than they did when they were in their 20s. And but generally speaking, as you get older, there is a slight tendency for it to lessen this substitute identity, because what happens, it repeats itself like Groundhog Day every single day, over and over again. And then eventually your consciousness looks at it and it sees it, and then it, in that recognition of discernment and distinction between you and it, although that's not how you might perceive it in that time, there's some level of distinction between you and it that's occurring. And that's what causes you to, for this substitute identity to drop away and dissolve. So the only thing keeping it alive is our belief that we are it. And as long as a society, we continue to believe that these words are a given, and these words are coming from our identity, and then humanity, we will stay in a deep, deep, deep sleep for millions and millions of years more. But as mentioned in the previous video of that, where I mentioned, and even just now I just mentioned, humanity will stay in that state as a collective. I didn't point out also that it makes no difference whether the whole world's trapped in this deep sleep or not. The question is whether you are willing to recognize your own sleepness, your own personal sleepness. What character has been created within you? And the best way to bring up this character is say your name, and then it brings it up, the current version of this idea. And just plug my phone in. So the current version of you may be predominantly positive, predominantly negative, but either way, it's still an illusion. And just throughout your day, see if you can recognize its predictive sentences, predictive situations that triggers it, its predictive judgments, and the key to is not taking it seriously, like really not taking it seriously. So there's different levels of seriousness. At the start, you might recognize these words, but there's something serious, and that serious is the substitute identity. Sort of, it's clouding your vision, and it's the one that's serious. It's never the consciousness that's serious about anything, but you want to head in the direction of non-seriousness, because ultimately, when liberation or enlightenment happens, when this substitute identity dissolves, then you realize that there's incomprehensible levels of non-seriousness as your fundamental nature of your identity. So that's the direction of where you want to go. And if there is seriousness, observe that. And don't identify with that. Smile at that, at the serious, the one taking it serious. So observe its judgments, observe its particular situations which trigger it. Observe its, as Eckhart Tolle says, even allow, one of his tricks is allow it to be diminished. Say if someone swears out a name to you, like calls you a name, not calls you, calls their substitute identity is calling your substitute identity a name. That's the actual facts of what's going on. Then allow your substitute identity to feel diminished occasionally. Not all the time, but occasionally. So that's one trick. Another trick is probably not recommended, but you could allow your substitute identity to swear back at them, but know that that's your substitute identity doing it, and maybe smile at the person, and hopefully it's a person you have a good rapport with. Smile at the person. This probably happens naturally. Many people do it anyway, in a joking way. It's very liberating when that happens. So someone's substitute identity swears at your substitute identity, and then you consciously swear back, you can say, and it's funny to both of you. So, there's many natural things that we're already doing. There's many tricks that we're already doing that have this substitute identity dissolving process at hand. That's you've already done it a million times. And yeah, generally when you're relaxed, you're more closer to your default contentless identity, your untouchable identity. And then all of a sudden, this consciousness, untouchable identity, it remembers the substitute identity before all its problems again, and then it believes in it, and then it's in the realm of experience of being touched and affected again. And you're so identified that you believe you're the one being affected. And I know what I'm saying here is a little bit of a leap. Um, Maybe it's best for some people, yes. It's probably still helpful to go and do counselling and work on the problems of this conceptual substitute self and spend money for it. Give it pharmaceutical drugs if need be. But ultimately, um, there's a couple questions you can ask your counsellor if you got one to know if you got a good counsellor. And really, you wouldn't even have to ask these questions because if you had a good counsellor, it would be self evident that through their words and their direction, what they can over and over and over again, what they're insisting who you are. A good counsellor would even have on their front door who you are as your identity. I know when I used to visit the Church of Scientology many years ago, I visited them about a few times over the many years ago, and just because I was interested in learning what their methods are. But I think at the Melbourne office, and it's probably at all the offices. I visited once the New York office as well when I was in New York, and on the front door, as soon as you walk in, they got some like beautiful chrome letters that state your identity, which is something on the lines of you are untouchable. It's not untouchable, but they say something, I can't remember what it is, but it's that they put it on the front door just to remind you as soon as you come in the front door who you are. Scientologists believe who you are is ever perfect as well. They somehow discovered that through their learnings. And there's many religious references that make that be ye whole, and there's many references of your original identity. But yeah, having a counselor where that if you can ask them a question, am I depressed? You can say to them, ask to the counselor, and they'll probably be perplexed by your question and say, yes, you are. Or I don't know if that's a good question, but or maybe the most direct question, which I don't think they'll understand either: am I touchable or untouchable? And maybe they'll come up with some big explanation to explain that you're both. But I wouldn't buy that. If I was ever shopping for a counsellor, um, I wouldn't. Anyone who has any inclination that we're touched, I would stay away from. I would walk away from them. Because they're only feeding and condemning an illusion to stay within you. And another important question is, have they had a liberation experience ever in their life? This is the funny thing. Someone can go and learn to have a 65 master's degrees on psychology, but have never once had an experience of liberation in their life. I dated once a woman, she was probably about 55 years old. It looked like all her hair was falling out. She looked sick and pale, and she was a senior lecturer of a university of a psychology of the psychology wing, psychology department. And when I went on a date with her, I said, look, I had this experience a few years ago. Well, actually, it was a while ago now, but it was probably just after maybe I had the experience. I said that, a few months ago or whatever, had this experience where I woke up in the morning and all of a sudden my ego was in front of me, and then it just disappeared for 1.5 days, and it felt really good, like undescribable level of peace and clarity. I still felt normal, but this big weight was lifted. And her reply was, yeah, if that was me, I would have put you on tranquilizers. And but that's just staggering, and she was serious as well. She wasn't joking. But that's just amazing how someone could be in a state of freedom and liberation, and her perspective was, yeah, I think we need to drug you up. And but that's, you know, just, it is what it is. I guess that's just the way the psychology world's taught. And but that's why I feel like I have expressed, in this video and in a few other videos, the psychology industry is, if their goal is believing that you are those textbooks on the 5,000 mental conditions, and that's you, and we need to fix you and your disorder, then that's wrong, 100% wrong. While it's useful to give a name for a disorder so you can help generate awareness, this is very effective. To have a label for it, to recognize its characteristics, that's fantastic for awareness, for generating. Because if you don't know about something, then it's living within you, this substitute identity, unchecked. So if you can start to become aware and break down all its characteristics, um, then that can be helpful. But the ultimate thing to if you sum down to all the characteristics, as Eckhart Tolle says, is if it had a title of a book, this substitute identity, it would be titled "The Reason Why I Can't Be Why I Can't Be Happy" or something. But the whole essence of this is unsatisfactoriness, disturbance. It's in a never-ending, constant state of disturbance. And until we're really really liberated, we're actually living right now in a permanent state of disturbance. Even I am right now speaking to you, but we're just so used to it. It's what we've been brought up since a baby, and we don't know any different. It's a permanent state of disturbance, and until this weight gets lifted, you will never know any different. It's like the frog that gets boiled in the water. It just slowly acclimatizes it and gets boiled, and that's sort of the way we're living. As a baby, you probably don't even have memories of what it was like not yet to have this substitute identity yet. So there was so much weightlessness felt as a baby. But even you still taking it on an energetic level from your parents. You've picked it up the energy levels of their identified states. It transmutes to you, and then you identify with the energetic level of it. So that's why some babies cry more than others, because they've picked up they've already created a substitute identity that's very disturbed, which all substitute identities are disturbed anyway. And but that's why there's variances in babies. And some people believe also it's the identifications from past lifetimes. Scientology believe in that stuff a lot about past lifetimes, and they're on a never-ending struggle to undo even past lifetime stuff, not just in this lifetime. But yeah, the whole key to disidentifying is that disidentifying. There's something within you that sees this repetitive groundhog judger in you, that sees this repetitive groundhog affected one in you to its own judgments. And then there's something within you that doesn't take it seriously, and that's the real you. So that's generally the direction, and there's endless ways you can do it. There's so many exercise. I don't know if I've mentioned it before. Another woman I dated, she was like a master level sort of. She was a psychologist sort of, but she was more into what I'm sort of talking about in the mindfulness aspect. And she would go to get contracts from big corporations, and she'll get the male managers to get in the room and abuse each other, to swear at each other. And one of the managers said, "I'm not going to do that to my fellow colleagues." And she goes, "All right, well, do it to me then." Like the exercise was to diminish this substitute identity, and then just let it be diminished and see what happens, and see if you can crumble it, and then you can be more unaffected. And then if you can be more unaffected, you can deal with your employees better in the workplace environment. You can deal with higher levels of stresses. So she was upskilling. She was attempting to upskill the management using this very unorthodox method. And she said, you can do it to me then. You try it on me. And the guy said, all right, you got man hands, you got this, you're ugly, you're that, blah, blah, blah. And then after he had his 2 minute rant, she said, oh, I told you to abuse me, not be honest. But but that's yeah. There's so much technique. You can invent your own techniques, and I'm sure you're doing it. Many people are just really good at making jokes. When people substitute identities, being very serious, and they identify. There's some people really good at breaking that pattern and helping do jokes. But sometimes jokes doesn't work. And sometimes just walking away. You got to walk away as well because it's just too much. The person's substitute identity is just hammers and hammers away. And in rare cases, even Eckhart Tolle says you might have to defend yourself against these substitute identities that try to do physical violence or something. But ultimately, yeah, this substitute identity, it's not personal. It's just the figment of our imagination that seems to have a life of its own, but it doesn't really. It's just when it finally gets exposed and you experience a liberation, then you'll know what it's like. Many people that have had near-death experiences, they all say the same thing. It feels unbelievably beautiful. It's so nice and easy and effortless, and you can't be offended anymore. There's no one offended. People used to swear at Buddha when he would travel village to village teaching mindfulness, and his disciples would ask him, "How come Buddha or whatever they used to call him? How come you're not offended by these people?" And then Buddha would say, I look inside myself, but there's nothing there to be touched or offended. And he's referring to the state of no self, which is the state, this is the self, and that's not that long around, which is no self. And I think that's what Eckhart Tolle said the Buddha means as well. It means no self, which is the awakened one, no self. So no self means you don't have a substitute self anymore. And Jesus's famous words is deny thyself. He's referring to this illusionary self. So I don't know, take Jesus's advice and deny it. But that's ultimately, yeah, the process to waking up is deny thyself, deny thyself, deny thyself every single day, every day. Find ways to smile at it somehow, not take it seriously somehow. And that's the strongest vibration to getting towards back to who you are. It's not getting back to you already are who you are, but it's severing the cloud of illusion, the veil over your eyes, allowing it to blow off in the wind. And then what's left was already there, and that's the cosmic joke. So there is no development for the self, for the true self you. It's not doesn't consist of content, and it's ever whole because it's non-measurable. It's contentless, immaculately ever perfect, impeccable. And we're hitting the my lucky freeze coming up now, so that's the end of the video. Thanks everyone. See ya.